The sun hung high in the sky, and the road shimmered with heat. It was one of those afternoons when everything felt slow, but the young businessman driving his shiny black car had no patience for slow. He had an important meeting in the city, one he had spent weeks preparing for. His suit was crisp, his watch expensive, and his confidence even more so. He drove fast, glancing at the time every few minutes, annoyed by anything that slowed him down. The road ahead looked clear, and he pressed the accelerator a little more. He was already imagining himself stepping into the meeting room, shaking hands, impressing people with his charm. But life has a funny way of stopping people right when they feel unstoppable, without warning. His car gave a strange jerk. He frowned and looked at the dashboard. A light was blinking, a warning signal. Before he could react, the engine made a rough coughing sound and slowly died. The car rolled forward a little and then stopped in the middle of the empty road. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, hitting the steering wheel lightly. He tried starting it again. Nothing. The engine stayed silent. He tried a second time, then a third. Still nothing. His frustration grew. He stepped out of the car and looked around. The road stretched far in both directions, and not a single car was in sight. The heat made the air waver, and the silence made him feel stranded. He pulled out his phone and called roadside assistance. The operator told him someone would arrive soon. How soon? He demanded. But the operator couldn't give a clear answer. He hung up with a sigh. Minutes passed slowly. He checked the time again and again. The meeting was slipping further away with each second. He kicked a small stone on the road, angry at the world, at the situation, and at his own luck. Then, in the distance, he finally saw a small truck approaching. He stood a little straighter, expecting a group of mechanics, or at least a man with strong arms, tools hanging from his belt. But when the truck stopped near his car, the person who stepped out surprised him completely. It was a young woman. She wore a faded blue jumpsuit with a few oil stains, her sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her hands had a bit of grease on them. She looked calm, confident, and used to the work she did. But to him, she didn't look like what he expected a mechanic to be. She walked toward him with a polite smile. "You called for help." He blinked, confused. "Yes. But they sent you." "Yes," she said simply. He didn't mean to sound rude, but the words came out sharper than he intended. "Are you sure you can handle this kind of work?" Most people would get angry at a comment like that, but she didn't. She just looked at the car and then back at him. "I've been doing this for years," she said gently. "Let me take a look." He stepped aside, feeling a little awkward but still not fully convinced. She opened the car's hood, leaned in, and listened carefully. Her hands moved with confidence, touching wires, feeling parts, checking connections. She didn't look confused even for a second. He watched her silently. The sun was hot, but she didn't seem bothered by it. She worked with a steady rhythm, her eyes scanning the engine with complete focus. It was clear she knew what she was doing, but he didn't want to admit that yet. "So, what do you think?" he asked, trying not to sound impatient. She didn't answer immediately. She leaned closer, listened again, and lightly tapped a part of the engine. "It's a simple issue," she said. "The fuel pump isn't getting power. Probably a loose connection." He raised an eyebrow. "Simple. My car completely died." She smiled a little. Sometimes simple things cause big problems. She reached into her toolbox, pulled out a small tool, and adjusted something inside the engine. The movement was quick and precise, like she had done it hundreds of times before. Then she tightened a wire, cleaned a small connector, and stepped back. "Try starting it now," she said. He looked at her, unsure. "Already? That's it. Try it," she repeated calmly. He got into the car, turned the key, and the engine started instantly smooth. Strong, alive again. The sound was perfect. He stared at the dashboard, shocked. He stepped out of the car again. "How did you do that so fast?" She wiped her hands on a cloth and shrugged. "It was just a loose wire. Nothing complicated." He felt embarrassed but tried to hide it. "Well, I guess you got lucky," he said awkwardly. She raised her eyebrows slightly, not offended but amused. "Maybe," she replied. He felt even more awkward now. "Anyway, thanks," he said, but his voice didn't sound as confident as before. He looked down at his shoes, feeling something he rarely felt, humility. She began packing her tools back in the box. He watched her with a strange feeling growing inside him. She moved with grace, with certainty. There was nothing clumsy or unsure about her. She didn't need anyone's approval. She didn't need compliments. She just did her job with quiet pride. When she closed the toolbox, she said, "Your car should be fine now. But if you have any trouble, you can visit the workshop. It's not far from here." He nodded slowly. "I'll do that." She gave him a small smile, a genuine one, not forced or formal. "Drive safe," she said before walking toward her truck. He stood there watching her leave. The sunlight reflected off her jumpsuit as she climbed into the small truck. She started the engine, glanced at him once through the window, and drove away. The road fell quiet again. He looked at his car, then at the fading shape of her truck. Something about her had left a mark on him. Maybe it was her calmness. Maybe it was her confidence. Maybe it was how she didn't let his rude comment affect her. Or maybe it was the way she fixed something in minutes that he had thought was a disaster. He got into his car and drove away. But his mind wasn't on the meeting anymore. It was on her. He felt a strange mix of curiosity and guilt. Curiosity because he couldn't understand how he had misjudged her so badly, and guilt because he realized he had looked down on her without even knowing her as he drove. He kept thinking about her voice, her movements, the way she worked. The meeting he had been rushing toward no longer felt as important. A few hours later, after he finished his business, he found himself checking the road where the breakdown happened. He didn't know why he was doing it, but something inside him wanted to see the workshop she mentioned. He wasn't sure whether he wanted to apologize properly, thank her again, or simply see her one more time. He only knew one thing. That day, on a hot, empty road, a simple mechanic had made him question his own attitude. His life had always been fast and full of pride, but after meeting her, something small but meaningful had shifted inside him. He felt it even though he couldn't explain it. And he didn't know yet that this small shift would grow into a change big enough to transform his entire life. The woman he had insulted without thinking would soon become someone he couldn't stop thinking about. And this unexpected, simple meeting on the side of the road was only the beginning of a story that neither of them saw coming. The next morning began with the same busy rhythm as usual at the workshop, but things felt slightly different. A few of the mechanics were still whispering about what happened the previous day. How the visitor had made fun of the young mechanic. How he had stood there laughing while she quietly fixed his car in minutes. And how he had walked away looking embarrassed. But for the young mechanic herself, life moved on. She wasn't someone who carried grudges. She simply came in, tied her dusty hair back like she always did, washed some engine parts in the sink, and began her usual day. But the man she had helped wasn't moving on so easily. He couldn't stop thinking about her. When he returned home the night before, he had tried to distract himself. He watched a TV show, cooked dinner, played some songs on his speakers, but none of it cleared his head. The image of her calm face, her steady hands, and the quiet confidence she carried stayed with him. He had met many people in his life, but something about her was different. She was real. She was humble. She didn't try to impress anyone, and yet she had impressed him more than anyone ever had. He kept replaying his own behavior in his mind, and each time he felt a little more ashamed. Why had he spoken like that? Why had he assumed she couldn't do the job just because she didn't fit his idea of a mechanic? Why had he laughed? He had judged her in seconds, and she had answered him not with arguments but with skill. He wanted desperately to fix the mistake he made. He didn't want her to think he was just another rude customer who looked down on people. So the next afternoon he drove back toward the workshop. He didn't have a car issue this time. He didn't need repairs. He didn't even know exactly what he was going to say. He rehearsed his apology while driving. No, that sounded too stiff. Maybe something more honest. But when he pulled up in front of the shop and saw her again, all his planned words disappeared. She was kneeling beside a car, checking a wheel, her hands covered in grease, her face slightly sweaty in the heat. He realized how hard she worked and how little credit she probably received. It made his guilt even heavier. She looked up when she heard footsteps and stood up slowly, wiping her hands on a cloth. She didn't look annoyed or angry. She simply looked neutral, as if she had already forgotten about yesterday. But he hadn't. He walked over and tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. After a second attempt, he finally managed to say, "I'm sorry about yesterday." She blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected him to come back, much less to apologize. Most customers who acted arrogantly never apologized. They just drove away and carried their ego with them. She didn't say anything right away. She simply nodded slowly, waiting for him to continue. And he did. He explained that he had been wrong, that he had judged her unfairly, that he was embarrassed by his behavior. He admitted he didn't like the person he had been in that moment. It wasn't a long speech, but it was honest enough to make her look at him differently. She finally spoke, and her voice was calm. She said she wasn't angry, only surprised. She admitted she had faced that kind of treatment before, and over time she had learned not to let it affect her. People often assumed she wasn't capable just because she didn't look like the mechanics in movies or magazines. She never argued with those people. She simply let her work speak for her. That was her way of surviving and earning respect in a field where respect wasn't given easily. He nodded, listening carefully. He admired how strong she was, how she didn't let negativity change her attitude or her work. He felt relieved that she wasn't upset with him, but also sad that she had faced this kind of judgment so often. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt calmer than before, more open. He wanted to stay a little longer, but he didn't want to make her uncomfortable. So he thanked her again and slowly began to walk back to his car. But just before he reached the door, she called out to him and asked if his car was running fine. It was a simple question, maybe just polite, but it made him smile. He replied, "Perfect, better than before." Over the next few weeks, small encounters continued to happen. Sometimes he would drop by with a simple question about his car, nothing serious, just an excuse to talk. Other times he would bring snacks for the whole workshop, pretending it was for everyone even though his eyes always searched for her reaction. She wasn't clueless. She noticed, but she didn't tease him or push him away. She simply accepted his presence with a quiet smile. Slowly, a soft friendship formed between them, not forced, not rushed, but natural. He learned that she had grown up helping her father in a small garage, which is where she learned most of her skills. She told him that she liked engines because they were honest. If something was wrong, they didn't hide it. They made a noise, a sound, a sign, and if you listened carefully, you could always find the problem. But people, she said with a small laugh, were much harder to read. He, in turn, told her stories about his work, his family, and how he had always been surrounded by people who spoke loudly but rarely listened. He admitted that the first moment he saw her, not the day he insulted her, but the moment she fixed his car, was the first time he truly felt humbled in years. She didn't know what to say to that. She simply shrugged and kept working, her cheeks slightly flushed. One windy afternoon, he found her sitting alone outside the workshop during her lunch break. She was eating simple homemade food, sitting on an old wooden bench. He hesitated before asking if he could sit beside her. She nodded. They shared quiet conversation, interrupted now and then by the sound of passing cars or distant traffic. He asked her if she had ever thought about opening her own garage someday. She laughed softly and said, "Maybe one day, but dreams cost money, and for now." She was just trying to save as much as she could. Without thinking too much, he said he believed she could do it. She looked at him, surprised by the confidence in his voice. She wasn't used to people believing in her. Most of her life, people had doubted her, questioned her, or overlooked her completely. Hearing someone speak with trust made her heart feel unexpectedly warm. Days turned into weeks, and small moments kept bringing them closer. Sometimes she would text him when she finished work, just to share something funny that happened at the shop. Sometimes he would stop by to give her a ride home after a long shift. She never asked, but he always offered. She tried refusing at first, but he insisted gently, and eventually she accepted. Their conversations became longer, deeper, more personal. One evening, rain poured heavily across the city. The workshop was closing early because water had leaked into the back storage area. She stood outside under the small roof, hesitant to walk home in the storm. He happened to be nearby and stopped his car when he saw her. He handed her an umbrella from the passenger seat and told her he would wait until she was safe inside. She didn't expect him to do that, but she appreciated it more than she said. When she got home, she turned around before entering the gate and saw him still there, waiting until she closed the door. Something shifted quietly in her heart that night. She wasn't someone who fell easily. She had been independent for years, depending on no one but herself. But this man, who had started off with arrogance, had changed in ways she didn't expect. His behavior wasn't loud or dramatic. It was consistent, gentle, and sincere. She had met many people who apologized with words, but he apologized with actions. As time passed, their bond deepened until it became something neither of them could ignore anymore. Their story didn't grow from big gestures or expensive moments. It grew from small things: respect, patience, willingness to understand, and the habit of showing up even when it wasn't required. What started with a rude comment and a quick repair was turning into something meaningful, something delicate, something real. And while neither of them said it out loud yet, anyone watching from the outside could see it happening, the slow, steady beginning of love. The days continued to pass quietly, and the bond between them slowly grew stronger without either of them forcing it. Every moment they shared felt natural. They didn't try to impress each other. They didn't pretend to be someone else. They simply showed up as who they were, and that was enough. She still worked long hours at the workshop, starting every morning before the sun fully rose and finishing after most shops had already closed. But her days didn't feel as heavy anymore. There was something warm in her routine now. She found herself smiling at small things like when her phone lit up with a message from him asking how her day was going, or when he stopped by with a warm drink on cold mornings. She didn't ask him to do any of this, but he did it anyway. Not because he wanted praise, but because he wanted to make her day easier. He had changed more than he realized. Before meeting her, he lived a comfortable life, but it lacked meaning. He spent money easily, traveled often, and rarely thought about anyone beyond his own circle. But she made him think differently. When he saw how hard she worked, how she carried herself with dignity despite being overlooked by so many, he began to notice more things around him. He noticed the workers sweeping the streets early in the morning. He noticed the woman selling fruit on the corner. He noticed people he had ignored all his life. It wasn't just that she fixed his car that day. She had fixed something inside him too. Something he didn't even know was broken. One Friday afternoon, the workshop was busier than usual. Cars lined up outside the gate, horns honking impatiently, customers pacing back and forth. She was covered in grease from head to toe, but she didn't slow down. She moved from one car to the next with calm focus. Even when a man complained loudly about his car taking too long, she responded with her usual gentle tone, promising to check it soon. Her patience amazed him every time. He had arrived a little earlier than normal, planning to bring her a snack since she barely took breaks on busy days. When he walked in, he immediately noticed how stressed the other mechanics looked, but she, despite all the pressure, remained steady. He walked over quietly and placed the food on her small work table, whispering that she should eat something before she got dizzy. She looked up with tired eyes but smiled softly. Then she took a bite and sighed with relief. He watched her as she ate, noticing how her shoulders finally relaxed. She never asked for help. She never complained. But he could see when she needed a break even before she realized it herself. That was one of the things he admired most about her. She carried so much weight on her own, yet she still made room to help others. When the rush finally ended, she sat down on a wooden stool beside the tool cabinet. The sun was beginning to set, painting the workshop walls a warm shade of orange. He sat beside her, letting the silence wrap around them. They didn't always need words. Sometimes just sitting side by side felt more comforting than any conversation. After a while, she asked him why he kept coming back to the workshop when his car had no issues. He froze for a moment, unsure how honest he should be. But then he remembered how real their connection had always been. So he took a quiet breath and told her the truth, that he liked talking to her, that she made his days feel lighter, that he admired the way she worked and the person she was. She didn't respond right away. Her fingers nervously rubbed the edge of the cloth in her hand. She wasn't used to hearing things like that. Most people never looked past her job or her appearance. But he saw her, not the grease on her hands, not the uniform she wore, not the old shoes that had stains she couldn't wash out. He saw her heart, her strength, her calm spirit. She finally looked up and said she liked talking to him too. Her voice was soft, almost shy. It was the first time she openly admitted it, and the moment carried a gentle sweetness that made him smile. Their connection grew deeper from that day onward. He started helping her with simple tasks at the workshop, not because she needed help, but because he wanted to share her world. He carried heavy boxes, cleaned up tools, and even learned how to change a tire properly. The other mechanics teased him sometimes, joking that he had become the workshop's assistant, but he didn't mind. He laughed along with them. She watched him quietly most of the time, surprised by how sincerely he tried. She had seen many people walk into the workshop with expensive clothes and proud attitudes, but none of them had ever shown this kind of humility. He wasn't pretending to be someone else. He was simply learning, and she liked that about him. One evening, after a long shift, he offered to take her out for dinner. She hesitated at first because she wasn't used to going out after work. Her clothes were dirty, her hands rough, her hair messy. But he looked at her with kind eyes and said he didn't care about any of that. He just wanted to spend time with her. She finally agreed. They went to a small roadside place that served warm food and strong tea. They sat at a table near the window, the cool evening breeze blowing softly. They talked about simple things, childhood memories, dreams they never told anyone, moments that shaped them. She told him about the day she decided to become a mechanic and how people laughed at her, saying she wouldn't last a month. She had lasted years. He told her about the lonely feeling of having everything but still feeling empty. He said he didn't want a life filled only with expensive things. He wanted a life with meaning. And somehow, since meeting her, he felt closer to that dot when he dropped her home that night. She lingered by the car door for a moment before whispering thank you. It wasn't just for the dinner. It was for seeing her, listening to her, and treating her like someone who mattered. He wanted to say something in return, something about how grateful he was for her presence in his life. But the words stayed in his chest. Instead, he simply nodded and watched her walk inside. The next week brought a surprise neither of them expected. A big car pulled up into the workshop, shiny, expensive, and clearly belonging to someone important. A man stepped out dressed in branded clothes, looking around arrogantly. He asked loudly for the most skilled mechanic to check his engine. The other workers pointed toward her, and the man looked shocked, as if he couldn't believe they were serious. He raised his eyebrows and questioned whether she actually knew what she was doing. Hearing those familiar words again made something twist inside her, not because she cared about the insult, but because she thought she had moved past feeling hurt by such things. She approached the car calmly, ready to do her job as usual. But before she could speak, he stepped forward. He stood beside her and looked directly at the customer. He explained firmly that she was the best mechanic there, that she had fixed his own car in minutes when others couldn't, and that if the customer wanted real skill, he should let her handle it. His voice wasn't rude or loud. It was steady, protective in a respectful way. She didn't expect him to defend her. No one had ever done that for her before. The customer silently stepped aside, and she began inspecting the engine while he stood nearby, arms crossed, making sure she was treated with respect. She worked calmly, as always, but inside her heart felt warm. Later, after the customer left, she walked over to him and said she didn't need protecting. He nodded and said he knew that, but he still wanted people to give her the respect she deserved. She didn't argue. She simply looked at him with eyes full of emotion she couldn't put into words. That moment marked a turning point. Their feelings were no longer hidden behind small glances or soft smiles. They were growing into something undeniable, something stronger than friendship, deeper than admiration. She felt safe with him. He felt inspired by her. Their worlds, once so different, were slowly blending into one, and although neither of them had said it out loud yet, the truth was clear to anyone watching. They were falling in love, quietly, slowly, and beautifully. The morning air felt unusually calm, as if the world itself knew something important was about to happen. She woke up before sunrise like she always did, but today her heart felt different. It wasn't heavy, it wasn't tired. It felt warm, almost excited, though she didn't know why. He woke up early too, but for a very different reason. He had been planning something for weeks, quietly preparing, making sure everything felt right. He wasn't nervous about what he wanted to do. He was nervous about whether he deserved the answer he hoped for. Their bond had grown slowly, naturally, and with real respect. They had reached a point where they didn't need to explain their feelings with dramatic words. Their actions spoke for them every day. Still, some things in life needed to be said aloud, and he knew the moment was coming. That afternoon, the workshop wasn't very busy. Only 2 cars were parked inside, one waiting for a small repair, and another for an oil change. The quietness felt peaceful. She was wiping her hands on a cloth when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw him standing there with a hesitant smile. He looked different today. He wasn't wearing his usual casual clothes. He looked slightly more dressed up, but not in an overconfident way. More like he wanted to look presentable for something that mattered. She raised an eyebrow and asked if something was wrong. He shook his head. Then he asked if she could take the rest of the day off. She frowned at the request. She never took days off. Not unless she was sick, and even then she showed up anyway. Work was part of her identity. Dependable, honest. He gently insisted, saying there was something he wanted to show her, something he didn't want to rush, something he hoped she would say yes to. His words were simple, but there was a softness in his eyes that made her heart skip. After a moment of silence, she agreed. They walked out together, the workshop gate closing behind them. Instead of leading her to his car, he suggested they walk. The air was warm, and the sun hung low in the sky, turning everything golden. Walked through small streets, past tiny shops and fruit stalls, past children chasing each other and people sitting outside drinking tea. She liked these simple scenes. Life felt real, here, not fancy, not noisy, just honest. As they walked, they talked about small things. Nothing serious, nothing heavy. Just the kind of conversation that happens between 2 people who are comfortable in each other's company. But he kept glancing at her every few minutes, as if trying to gather courage. After a while, they reached a quiet field on the edge of the town. The grass swayed gently in the breeze. A few birds flew low across the sky. The place felt peaceful, almost untouched. She looked around, surprised. She had never been here before. He guided her to a wooden bench placed under a tall tree. A small table stood beside it, with 2 cups of tea already waiting. She stared at him with wide eyes, shocked that he had planned this. He smiled awkwardly and said he wanted the moment to feel warm, not rushed, not crowded, just the 2 of them and the open sky. They sat down together. She took a sip of the tea, still warm, still sweet just the way she liked it. He waited quietly, giving her time to settle, time to breathe, time to feel safe. Then, slowly, he began to speak. He told her how he used to be proud, careless, always in a hurry, never thinking about the feelings of the people around him. He admitted how embarrassed he still felt when he remembered the rude way he spoke to her on the day they met. He said that day changed more than just his behavior, it changed his heart. She listened quietly, not interrupting, not looking away. She appreciated that he spoke honestly, without trying to make himself look better. He continued, saying she taught him more without trying than anyone ever did with effort. She taught him patience. She taught him humility. She taught him the value of real work, real kindness, and real connection. He then took a deep breath. His hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, more from the weight of the moment. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny box. She froze. He didn't open it yet. Instead, he placed it on the bench, between them, and looked straight into her eyes. He told her he wasn't offering her a life of luxury or grand promises. He was offering her a life where she would always be respected, supported, and loved honestly. He said he wanted to stand beside her in everything she did, not as someone saving her, not as someone showing off, but as someone who admired her deeply. Finally, he opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, no giant stone, no flashy design, just something elegant and meaningful. She felt her breath catch in her throat. He asked her, with a soft voice, if she would marry him. For a moment she couldn't speak. Her heart felt full of shock, of emotion, of the memories of everything they had lived through together. She thought about the day she met him, the insult, the embarrassment, the unexpected respect that followed, the friendship, the slow-blooming love. She thought about how he always treated her as an equal, how he never made her feel small, how he never tried to change her, and how he showed up again and again. Tears gathered in her eyes, not of sadness but of overwhelming gratitude. She took a slow breath and whispered yes. He let out a quiet sigh of relief, almost laughing with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, just like the moment itself. They sat there for a long time, saying nothing. The world around them continued quietly, the birds, the wind, the soft rustling of leaves, but nothing felt the same anymore. They were no longer 2 separate lives trying to understand each other. They were a pair now, connected by choice and love. Later that week, they told her co-workers at the workshop. The news spread quickly, and everyone reacted with surprise and happiness. Some teased her about how she had fixed his heart more than his car. Some patted him on the back for having the courage to be with a woman so strong and grounded. He didn't mind the jokes. He was proud of the woman he was going to marry. Their families reacted differently at first. His family was confused, unsure how a wealthy young man ended up engaged to a mechanic, but the moment they met her, everything changed. They saw her sincerity, her quiet confidence, her genuine kindness. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, she was simply herself, and that was more than enough. Her family, on the other hand, was emotional in a different way. They had always worried she would end up alone because people often judged her for her job or appearance. Seeing someone love her so deeply made them relieved, grateful, and happy. The wedding happened a few months later. It wasn't a huge event. They chose a small ceremony, surrounded by the people who mattered. She didn't wear a fancy gown. She wore something simple, clean, and beautiful, something that felt true to her. He wore a suit that wasn't expensive but fit him perfectly. As they exchanged vows, he looked at her with eyes full of sincerity. He promised to always respect her, to stand by her, to listen to her, and to never forget the lesson she taught him on the day their worlds first collided. She promised to share her strength with him, her honesty, and her quiet determination. She promised to build a life with him that was not about luxury or wealth, but about kindness and togetherness. When he finally kissed her, the whole crowd cheered loudly. Some wiped tears, others laughed with happiness. The moment felt warm and unforgettable. After the ceremony, they walked out hand in hand, beginning a new chapter together. And every time he told their story later in life, he always began with the same line. The mechanic I insulted not only fixed my car in minutes, she fixed the way I see the world, and now, she's my wife. Their story became a reminder to everyone around them that love doesn't care about status, appearance, or money. It grows where kindness is present. It blossoms where respect exists. And sometimes, it starts in the most unexpected places, like a broken car on a quiet road.